Welcome back to Top of Mind. My name is Hayley Westoby and it is 2025. Last year was crazy. We launched the podcast and we had so much success. I can't believe how many subscribers we already have, which is just absolutely mind-blowing and amazing for me to see. We started this podcast to really help people understand marketing, social media and personal branding a little bit better. Not only through our solo episodes, but through interviewing people who had done it and done it well. Now, if you are watching, you'll notice that the setup is slightly different, and that's because I'm in my second bedroom at home. The reason why I set up the studio here is because in 2025, there's going to be a lot more solo episodes. Solo episodes which are answering your questions about personal branding, marketing, social media, questions that you might have about your own business that we'll be able to help you unpack. And so I really wanted to create a space that was really easy for me to record in, which means that I can create more content for you guys, and it just makes everything a lot easier. So this is my little home studio. You're gonna be seeing a lot more of it. With that in mind, this episode today is a little bit different. It's a little bit different because it's a talk that I did last year in October. I was really lucky and I had a massive pinch me moment where in October 2024, I was asked to speak at South by Southwest, which was huge. Now, a little bit of context, the year before, so 2023, I was actually running an event for a client at South by Southwest. And I remember thinking to myself, how cool would it be if I could talk on a stage like that? Like, that's goals. And then fast forward to 2024, I remember getting a phone call from my dad a few months out from the event that we were running again for our client in 2024. My dad said to me, he's like, when are you going to be on that stage? And I kind of brushed it off and was like, oh, Dad, I think I've got a couple more years of like doing smaller scale talks and things like that before I get on the big stage. And then a month later, South by Southwest called me and asked me to speak, which was insane. I think what was more insane was the fact that they asked me to talk about networking when it comes to creators and how creators can create networks and what networking looks like now in the era of creators and personal branding. So it was a huge pinch me moment for me last year. The panel discussion that I took part in was called the Ultimate Pickup Line. And we were talking about the fact that it wasn't, what you know anymore. It wasn't who you know anymore. It's all about who knows you. I was really lucky to be joined on this panel by Sophie and Lauren Meisner, both who I have interviewed before. I think it's episodes 13, 15, and 16. And also we had Mal Chia, who is the founder of Ecom Nation. He was moderating the chat and the discussion. I wanted to share this chat with you because this event was ticketed. I was really lucky to be able to record the content, so thank you to South by Southwest for letting me record the content so that I could share it with you guys, because I know that everybody that attended the talk really benefited from it and there would be so many other people that would benefit from this chat. That's all I got to say. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and if you do, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe or share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.
In 400 BC, the philosopher Plato wondered aloud whether the invention of writing would affect our ability to think. In the mid-20th century, when television became popular, we wondered whether it was going to turn us into a nation of zombies. For thousands of years, new technology has always created fear and skepticism in terms of what it would do to how we function as human beings. And now in the age of social media, we are at that time again, where we wonder whether social networks are now going to change the way in which we relate with each other. And that's fundamentally what the question is right now. Are these social networks and is the creator economy and the way in which we now consume information and create knowledge changing the way in which we form relationships with each other? That's what we're going to be discussing today on this panel, where we're going to be digging deep into what does networking look like in this digital age. Now, before I do that, can I just ask, show of hands, who is an entrepreneur in this room? Okay, so we have a few entrepreneurs. And who is an employee in another business? Great, thank you. The reason why I ask that is because that has fundamentally changed how businesses also need to think about the way their employees create their personal brands. So to help me dig into this a little bit more, I'm going to invite to the stage a wonderful panel of fantastic founders and leaders. Our first panelist is Hayley Westoby. She's a founder of Gambit Collective, a game-changing pay-as-you-go marketing agency that redefines how businesses approach social media, branding, and marketing. She has a decade of experience in the marketing advertising industry and a passion for consumer psychology. Welcome to the stage, Hayley. Our next guest is Lauren Meisner. She is a founder and director of the award-winning youth media brand Centennial World, reaching millions of Gen Zs each month. She co-hosts the daily internet culture podcast Infinite Scroll, where she explores themes surrounding the creator economy and social media trends, and is passionate about helping brands reach Gen Z in chronically online ways. Welcome, Lauren. And finally, we have Sophie Hood. Sophie is a founder of Soul Tonic. She's come from a background working 7 years across strategy and commercial finance positions at LVMH and Red Bull to now be the founder of Soul Tonic, a natural liver detoxifying recovery tonic based on Korean culture and preventative East Asian medicine. Welcome, Sophie. And I'm your moderator, Mal Chia. I'm a fractional CMO and retail futurist and founder of Ecom Nation. So what I want to start with is just a question for the panel in how networking has shaped your careers. So let's start with Sophie.
Thanks, Mal. The way I think about how networking has shaped my career is, you know, when someone leaves a company, say they're called Susan, Susan sends that big email thanking everyone and then sends her personal email, susanjoy@gmail.com, and says stay in touch. As an employee, you think, I'm never, ever, ever going to talk to Susan again. Like, good riddance, bye, maybe a LinkedIn like here and there. So I am Susan, and I stayed in touch with every single prominent advocate I had within each corporation that I was at, EY, LVMH and Red Bull, and having those advocates for me allowed me to then launch my own beverage business. And I actually launched a business while still working full-time, and had I not had that internal support and advocacy, I wouldn't have seen the initial growth that I saw. So it was, being really targeted with keeping networks over the years.
Great. Lauren?
Mine is a bit more, I don't know, maybe meta, but for me, my business ethos is to just fall in love with problem solving. I think if you can consider every single hurdle that you face in your career as just, a challenge that you need to problem solve your way through, then you can enjoy the ride much better. And so I use networking as a tool to kind of live out that ethos. So for me, I will give anyone anytime. Like if somebody emails me or asks me for a coffee, even if it's that dreaded, I just want to pick your brain, I will always make the time to go. And the same, in many cases, has been reciprocated to me. So just cold emailing leaders, mentors, and being direct and saying, I really would like your advice on XYZ, just not being afraid of that. I really use that in my toolkit.
And Hayley?
I think for me, networking started really early. I'm the daughter of a military father, and we moved every couple of years from when I was born, right? So that natural kind of ability to just be curious and nice to people is so underrated. And I think I've then been able to build my business. We have a 100% inbound business now, off the back of the networks and the connections that I've built over the years.
Curiosity that's a really powerful aspect of this, because I think if you're not naturally curious, you are probably not going to be going out there and networking, because a lot of people in your situation would probably have railed against the constant moving in the military life and almost resented it, but it sounds like you've almost embraced it.
Oh, I hated it growing up, but now I look back and I'm like, wow, like it's paid dividends being able to, as my dad would say, talk under wet cement to anybody. And I think just the ability to be naturally curious. Those people can't, they might not be able to offer you something now. They might not be able to offer you something in 10 years' time. But I think that being able to make those networks, the ability to then introduce that person to somebody else in my network or, and I think it's the beauty of this panel. I think the networking that we've all done and then subsequently how you came on board, I think is via a network of people that couldn't offer an immediate value exchange, but then all of a sudden we're all sitting here on a panel due to the fact that we've all been in someone else's network.
And Lauren, I just want to pick up on something you said before, just around the generosity of always making time for other people. So that's another aspect about the curiosity and the generosity as well. Is there a time when you could be too generous?
Honestly, I have never experienced an instance or an encounter or a relationship or a connection where I felt like I was being sucked dry. I think that's probably pretty rare. I think in general, people that might reach out to you, like they are looking for genuine help on something specific, right? So if you can kind of get to the bottom of that, then I don't think that you will be in a situation where you feel taken advantage of.
I do think you have to have boundaries though, because I think for me, like I'm a recovering people pleaser, right? Like I'll say yes to everybody because I want to meet new people, I want to make connections. And I think for me, having those, we were talking about it like that, can I get a coffee and pick your brain? It's like sometimes a coffee is the most inefficient way for you to get information out of me. Like my next available time slot is next Thursday, and if you need this information before then, a coffee is the least effective way for you to get that out of me. So I think actually having a conversation and interrogating those networks and requests of like, how can I best help you as quickly as possible, actually could be saving your own battery and theirs if they need that information quickly.
Now, when it comes to like what it means to be an expert in networking versus expertise, now you can see, particularly with how easy it is, not easy, but you know how well you can develop these networks without necessarily needing to meet in person. You know, is there a place now for true expertise? You know, we often hear that it's not what you know, it's who you know. Is that now truer than ever?
I actually don't even think it's about who you know now. I think it's about who knows you. And I think that expertise absolutely still has a place, because I think that networking, the way that I like to look at it is networking, very similar to an elevator pitch. I like to explain this to a lot of our clients, is it's not designed to sell you there and then. You're not supposed to sell your services or, you know, your product or anything there and then. Networking and your elevator pitch is designed to earn a second conversation. So I think that networking is the thing that gets you in the door, but your skill set and your expertise is the thing that keeps you in the house. And I think that if you don't have both, you'll be very quickly figured out. And I think that, you know, in this day and age, anyone can be an expert. And I think that's both terrifying and really exciting at the same time, because I think the people that are pretending to be experts in their space will be figured out really quickly, and they won't retain business, or they won't sell as much product over a long period of time. And I think that the people that are, you know, balancing upskilling as well as networking and building their own personal brands are the ones that are going to come out on top. And
Sophie, you recently won a competition with Gordon Ramsay and Janine Ellis.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that experience related to your that networking versus expertise? Like, what got you in the door with that opportunity and then maintaining that relationship with Janine and Gordon now, who are your mentors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So before going on the show, I didn't really have a personal brand. I didn't, because I was working in corporate. I was actually quite embarrassed to speak about what I was doing outside of work. And I was really embarrassed to post on TikTok about my creative outlet, which was my side hustle, because I was working a finance job and I thought I'd get in trouble. And there was no clear corporate policy of what I could and couldn't do. So when I was actually approached to be on the show, I had to have a really transparent conversation with Red Bull, with work, and say, hey, I've been approached to be on a business meets reality show for my side hustle, which is a beverage, which is not Red Bull, and I need to take anywhere from 1 day to 1 month of annual leave, and I'll be promoting my business, and it will be on Channel 9, and I might win prize money, which might allow me to quit this job. You know, how does that go down, right? But transparency within the workplace is everything. And by being upfront and transparent, I was then able to go on the show, and off the back of that, I was able to start building my personal brand in a really authentic way to me, because I was so upfront with them that they backed me and they allowed this creative outlet, which then has now allowed me to maintain my network with them. After winning the show, Janine and Gordon have obviously been fantastic, but it takes work. people of that calibre, and this is advice to anyone, if you think someone's too like famous or too big to reach out to, they're probably the ones that people aren't reaching out to. Seriously, like reach out to them. You would be surprised at how much like they'll reply to you. So Gordon Ramsay, I have a direct line with, and I speak to him and his head of content every single probably fortnight. And Janine, I meet up in person every month at her house. But that's me proactively making sure that that happens. And she's given me so much advice with my personal brand in posting, but you have to have that correlation between building and, as Hayley said, it's not just one session and she's your best friend. Like, you need to keep at it. And sometimes the value exchange isn't there at the very beginning.
Just a quick reminder that if you want a question answered or you want help with your social media marketing or personal branding, don't forget to leave us a comment or send us an email at hello@topofmindpod.com. That's hello@topofmindpod.com.
But at the same time, though, I'd imagine people of that calibre, and I've seen some of Gordon Ramsay's shows before, he doesn't suffer fools gladly. So in the case that if you really also had that expertise as well as the network when you went into that relationship.
As in, did I have the relationship?
Well, when you went into the relationship with Gordon and Janine, you were already in that field a bit of an expert because you had the experience with Red Bull in the business side.
So they thought I was an expert in what I was doing, right? They didn't think that I was an expert in anything that they were doing. And I think that's a big distinction, is that they respected me for giving something a go and for putting myself out there. And even though my business wasn't huge at the time that the show aired, I still won the show based on a range of challenges and being confident and proving to them that I had what it took to be an entrepreneur. And that's what they respected. And that's how we've now cemented the relationship.
Fantastic. Now, Lauren, as someone who studies internet culture for a living, and I'm going to be totally honest, I listened to your podcast. I understood maybe about a third of what was being said. I'm definitely not Gen Z, which means I probably need to listen to more of your podcasts. And you've also got a background in journalism as well. So we now live in this paradigm where what it means to be an expert has completely changed, and there are no gatekeepers. I'm guessing back decades ago in journalism there were established experts who you could reach out to, but that's completely changed now with knowledge now readily available. So how has this changed the way in which we become experts now?
I actually don't think that the internet has made everybody experts. I think that the internet has given us a lot of very loud, very wrong people who think that they're experts. So I think right now, genuine expertise is more valuable than ever because obviously, as you mentioned, anyone with a smartphone can, make a video about any type of information that they want. Previously, before social media and especially before TikTok, we got information through genuine experts or vetted sources, media outlets that had fact-checking teams. That's not to say that the information we were receiving wasn't, didn't have a bias or a lean, but regardless, this was typically factual information and we really listened to experts. So I think one of the biggest shifts that we see right now in terms of combating misinformation, disinformation, and kind of confusing information online is, I'm sure all of us have seen this on TikTok, but people will start a video or an opinion by listing their credentials or showing their degree, something like that to kind of establish that authority. I think that's a big shift in communication right now and how we communicate on social media online, communicate our expertise. But I think more broadly, I wouldn't say that there's no gatekeepers for Gen Z. I think we tend to believe that Gen Z has this, they have the world at their fingertips, right? They have this opportunity, especially with social media. You can start posting, you can launch a business, you can sell out a product in 60 seconds if a video goes viral. Those are all things, obviously, that we couldn't do before. So yes, that is definitely something new and beneficial to the industry and to the internet and to the younger generation. But with that comes a set of risks that we have never seen before. And that's something that we try and really communicate with our clients, our consulting clients, is if you're going to have your employees, for example, in your TikTok content, that could blow up. Employee generated content is super popular right now, but it also could end up on the wrong corner of the internet, as we've seen time and time again. We saw that with Tribe Skincare earlier this year. That was a set of, Gen Z young women in Sydney, and their faces and were on Andrew Tate's Twitter, right? Like, that is a horrific place to be. So there's a lot of risk that Gen Z faces now, where we've kind of removed, quote unquote, the gatekeeping. But on the flip side, to make it more positive, we're going to stop talking about Andrew Tate. There is a lot more disinformation, misinformation online, of course, but then because we have removed those gatekeepers in a way, there is also so much more valuable information online as well than ever before. Like, we have access to more valuable, more relevant information than we've ever had, and there's this opportunity for citizen journalists who are doing really great work, independent media. So, there's good that comes with the bad, but I would say we are at a critical point right now where we need brands, especially if you're going to ask your employees to feature in your brand profiles and things like that. It's a conversation that needs to be had. It's like, we need to take it really seriously.
And Sophie, so your background you're talking about before, that you come from a very corporate background and now into this world which you are now, like startups, e-commerce, beverages. How about with building those with employees, like building the personal brand? Like, what are some of the challenges which you think employers have with letting their employees build their brands online?
Yeah, so as Lauren said, we're at this very critical point where corporations want, theoretically, to be able to let employees post about their candle making side hustle and what they're doing on the weekend on LinkedIn, and do the day in a lives on TikTok, because that could be a creative outlet for them. But there is obviously the risks involved, because where's the line? Where does it stop? And how do you manage that? But what we're seeing is, and this is true data, is that the corporations and the companies that are being really transparent about company policies, what you can and can't do in terms of having a side hustle, what you can and can't say, and allowing a little bit more freedom online to their employees. Those employees are the ones with greater job satisfaction, and retention within those corporations increases. Because there's nothing worse than working your full-time finance job and then secretly doing all of this stuff on TikTok on a fake account and trying to get away with it, and being super nervous at your pay review that they're going to just present it all to you and give you like a negative inflation increase, or like give you a demotion. And it comes from the top, but it also comes from the employees to be able to say to your manager, what can and what can't I do? I'm interested in building candles. Like, can I do that? And often they'll say yes, because they want you to have that outlet that's outside of work. And I've definitely found that. I've worked with CEOs who are really, really trying to incorporate that into their company policy, encourage their employees to have freedom to post, to build a personal brand, to network. And we're seeing a lot more satisfaction in the jobs. Also, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur now. Everyone thinks that being an entrepreneur is their way out. It is really hard. It is much, much worse than your job that you're currently in. Trust me. Like, it is so bad. And some people are destined to be an entrepreneur, and that's amazing. But some people are looking at it as their way out, as financial freedom, as their way to create a new life. And what that person might just want, that's Susan again. Susan might just need a creative outlet within the confines of her corporate job that she's allowed to do. And that's where Susan's now satisfied at work. She can still work her finance job. Her manager's managing her in a transparent way. Company policy's all good. Everyone's happy. So I think that's the shift that we're seeing now, especially with this creator economy and how everyone is communicating online with each other.
Hey, just quickly, if you are enjoying this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with your friends. Now back to the episode.
I was going to say, adding to Soph's point, I think this is the first real generation where a full-time job can coexist with a side hustle. So there's no playbook for it, right? I think same as, women, it's something that being a 33-year-old woman, I get asked all the time, when are you having kids? It's like women working and running a business and having kids has never something that has coexisted before. So we're writing that playbook now. And so I think it's up to us and, you know, the people that are in the workforce that do want to grow a side hustle. As Sophie said, you know, entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. I put up a piece of content once a fortnight that tells people not to do it, just as a reminder. I'm like, if you're having those intrusive thoughts, don't do it. It's not worth it. You know, when I'm going through all of my accounting stuff or stuff with a lawyer, it's just like, hey, I'm doing you public service announcement. It's not worth it, just in case you're thinking it. But in that sense, if you are wanting to be, you know, do your side hustle or, you know, share stuff that you're passionate about, that might not even be a job, that might just be, you know, you might be passionate about sustainability, but you don't work in a job that allows you to be passionate about sustainability. Being able to have those conversations, create that playbook for the generations to come is, I think, sits with us.
Hayley, what are some of the fears and concerns, I guess, which employers and firms have about letting their organisation, their employees build personal brands? Because I know that's something which I've heard a lot before, that they're worried that if they build a personal brand, they get known for something, someone's going to poach them, and amongst many, many other things.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's something that we answer every week when we have businesses come to us saying, we want to do the personal branding workshops or pilot programs that you guys run, but we're scared that if we give our employees all of this power to post on LinkedIn, what happens if they leave? And my response is really simple. If you're worried about them leaving because they're talking about what they do online, you've got a bigger problem than them posting online, right? At the end of the day, people aren't staying in an organisation just because they're allowed to post on social media. They're staying for a number of other reasons. You know, they might get the flexibility, the ability to work with a team, you know, all of the things that come with working for somebody. So I think that if your biggest fear in getting your team to share content online is that they're going to leave, it's the same saying as Steve Jobs, I think, said it. If you're not going to train your team because you're scared that they're going to leave and offer that skill set to somebody else, what happens if they stay? Like, you're going to end up with an unskilled, you know, workforce. So it's like, I would rather, as a business owner myself, I'd rather empower my team. I recently had someone leave my business. She was really strong on all of our socials, all of our LinkedIn. And I was like, well, she wanted something that we couldn't offer her. She wanted to get back into an industry that wasn't our industry. So I was like, go. Am I scared that she's going to take all our followers with her? No. Like, our brand exists on our own. So I think that one of the things that, you know, we talk about all the time when it comes to building personal brands within organisations is a personal brand can exist, but so can the business brand, and it needs to be this parallel strategy that coexists. It can't be one or the other. We have businesses that come to us that have really strong personal brands, but no one knows anything about their business brand, and vice versa. Really strong business brands, but no one knows who works for them. So I think being able to build that strategy as a parallel strategy is something that we always push for.
Now I want to pivot a little bit into now in-person networking and just talking about what role does in-person networking still play? Before, all of you were talking about the ability now to be able to create your personal brands by posting content on LinkedIn and being seen as an expert or at least an authority in that space. Is there still room for in-person networking in this day and age?
Duh.
Immediately, yes.
Yes.
Like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Because
More
I
than
think,
ever.
I mean, especially in the generation of AI, you know, we have people come, as part of the business, we write a lot of LinkedIn content for leaders, founders, you know, executives within massive organisations. And no one would know that their content is written by somebody else because we study their tone of voice. We understand what it is. You know, we understand what they're passionate about, how they speak. I speak in short sentences. So a lot of my content is like full stop, full stop, full stop, right? Or new line, right? So understanding how someone speaks and how someone shows up is really important. ChatGPT can't do that. It can do it to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But I think that with the rise of AI and things like generative text and fonts and, you know, messaging, AI is going to serve a really important role to make our jobs easier, but it's not going to replace it. And if you're generating a whole heap of content on LinkedIn through ChatGPT, but then when you get into the room you can't string a sentence together, you're going to be figured out really quickly, right? And I think it's the same as, you know, I always say, make sure your online persona mimics who you are in real life. Because if I'm sitting there being like, you know, I love women and, you know, every woman deserves to be blah, 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 and then I get in there and I'm talking shit about every woman in the room, everyone's like, hang on, that doesn't match up. So I think that, you know, in the age of, AI and generative content, it's one thing to be able to create all of this content. It's another thing to be able to back it up and be in the room and be able to hold those conversations, be curious about the people that are in front of you and that you're meeting. So I think that, in-person networking absolutely has a place. I think it's changed over the years. It's not as corporate and boring and vanilla as it once was, but it still serves a purpose.
Lauren, I'm really interested to find out, like, from what you're seeing from a Gen Z perspective, what are the attitudes towards in-person versus just a purely online-only relationship?
I think Gen Z is kind of like, they're in this weird place, right? Because so many of them entered the workforce when work from home was kind of commonplace. It was, most of us are working from home most of the week, right? Zoom meetings are the most common way that you have a meeting. So everything has been very online. Their upbringing has been very online. So they really do crave that in-person interaction. If you consider their favorite apps or some of their favorite apps, Geneva, Discord, Snapchat, those are community building messaging apps. Those are about connecting with your friends, with your community, and taking those relationships that you build online and bringing them offline. And I think there's an opportunity for brands to get involved with that. There's a big conversation right now on TikTok specifically about how Gen Z is saying, like, we don't have third spaces. We need somewhere that we can, meet people in real life. That's not a bar. That's, we don't have to spend $100 if we go out. So I feel like there's this missed opportunity somewhere with brands in their marketing strategies, and I think we will start to see this a little bit more, where instead of going down traditional advertising routes or marketing routes, they might start kind of helping facilitate those third spaces for Gen Z. I think that would be really powerful, and I think that's a great way to tap into that younger consumer.
That's a great insight, because one thing which I've definitely seen is around, like, the rise of running clubs.
Yeah,
For
totally.
instance, running's like a huge thing. And
Where are they now?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Well, Yochi dates. Yochi is the new meetup spot.
Yeah.
And Sophie, from your perspective, like, when one of our earlier conversations, you were saying that you have so many business deals which are just now completed just purely on TikTok alone.
Yeah, it is crazy. I think there's something to be said with what Hayley mentioned, and probably the most important, I guess, piece of advice for networking is that how you show up online needs to mimic exactly how you are in real life. And when I meet someone in real life after they've been following me on LinkedIn or TikTok and they say, "You're exactly how I thought you would be," that's the biggest compliment you could give me. Like, that is huge, because it means you're authentic and you can build trust with them very quickly. And that's what in-person networking does. It builds trust. So when I have, say, I just did a deal in New Zealand, the Harris Farm of New Zealand, it's called Faro Fresh. The category manager, the beverage manager, reached out to me via email, but she'd been following me on TikTok. And she said, "Hey, like, I've been following you on TikTok, your personal TikTok, by the way. I love your product. Like, I'd love to get it in the Harris Farm of New Zealand." And I was like, okay, like, amazing. And then we had a face-to-face call, so on Zoom still, but it was still more of an in-person networking type setup because you're one-on-one. And she said to me, she was like, "You're exactly how you speak in your videos. Like, I love this. Like, this is fantastic. I've been following you. You're the same." And instantly we had that trust built. And now next week I'm launching in store in New Zealand across all stores in Auckland. And that's going to facilitate the growth in New Zealand. And that's just a good example of how you kind of need the both. But I wouldn't have got that deal had I not shown up online. But had I not been the same person online, then I still wouldn't have got the deal. So it's kind of matching the two is really important.
And Hayley, when it comes to meeting in person, it's often seen as being an extrovert's, like, something for extroverts. Like, if you're introverted, you tend to shy away from that. So how could you succeed as an introvert without actually having to be the loudest person in the room or the most gregarious person in the room?
Hey, just quickly, if you are loving this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, or share it with your friends. Now back to the episode.
Well, I think that's the same as with building a personal brand, showing up on TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn. Everyone thinks it's an extrovert's game, but there's so many ways in which you can turn up as an introvert. I think if we look at an in-person meeting, I grew up with my parents always saying, speak to the quietest person in the room because you'll probably learn something more than you'll learn something from the loudest person in the room. And that's always been my approach, is like finding someone that kind of looks uncomfortable in a space. And I'm naturally, I say I'm an introverted extrovert, right? Like I need time on my own to like get my battery back up. But I thrive off being in spaces around other people. So typically I will seek out introverts. So if you're an introvert in this space, I'll find you. But I think that I'll seek them out and I will go and have a conversation with them. I typically always have like 4 or 5 questions up my sleeve, which are like my go-to questions, which will kind of get somebody talking. And I think that this is where kind of consumer psychology and understanding how humans are and how they behave is really important when it comes to having these conversations in person, because there's a number of different skills that you can actually just have by being an extrovert that would actually help an introvert in a situation like that. And, one of those techniques is like mirroring. So, if you say, oh, I've had a really big day, and you turn around and you go, oh, a big day, they then keep talking. And I think you've actually not added anything to that conversation. I've not spoken about myself at all. I've just mirrored the last part of their conversation, which has allowed them to have more confidence in what they're talking about. So I think that understanding that as an extrovert, especially when I'm hosting a lot of events and things like that, is really important. But I think as an introvert showing up online, there's a number of ways that you can do it. And one way that we talk about with our teams is commenting, especially on LinkedIn, for example. So many people are like, LinkedIn's full of wankers. And I'm like, I mean, it's your feed, right? Like you get the choice to follow them. That's on you, right? You can unfollow them at any point. So if you think that LinkedIn's full of wankers, I would say that's a you problem. But I would say that there's a huge opportunity that if, for example, Sophie was like, I'm really introverted, I don't feel comfortable posting my own LinkedIn content about my business. She could easily identify 5 to 10 experts or people in her industry or her area of expertise, whether it's, she wants to go into marketing or, product development or other business, e-com owners. She could then identify those 10 people and every day go onto each of those 10 people's pages and leave a really interesting comment on each of their posts. That's not just like, yes, I agree, because that just adds no value. So I think being able to comment and, add your own opinion on someone else's content and right off the back of that, especially with a platform like LinkedIn, people will see that, then people will follow you because you've added substance to somebody else's post. So I think that naturally the confidence can build by just commenting really valuable and insightful pieces of content on other people's content. And then when you have enough confidence to start sharing your own content, you can do that then.
And it's interesting because I noticed a lot of bots doing that. At least I assumed they're bots doing that, because sometimes the comments which you see left sound very...
Computer generated?
Computer generated. Yeah. They don't sound like a real human has actually written them. That's interesting. Lauren, in terms of just like the norms which are coming up through these different platforms, Hayley just touched on some of them just then. You have different norms, like, when you're speaking with someone in person, like Sophie talked about, you can see the body language, you can see how they respond to certain things, which you can't necessarily see online. So I guess from a online brand building, personal brand building perspective, what are some of those norms which you need to be aware of? Because I know certain things like liking something or giving someone a thumbs up is apparently like, no bueno now.
I mean, I think that this is one of the biggest pieces of advice that we give to brands across the board. And it's more specifically about Gen Z. Obviously, they are living their lives online, and that is obviously the consumer group that a lot of brands are trying to reach. But specifically, if you are trying to show up authentically online, my biggest piece of advice is you need to have someone on your team or someone that you're working with who understands the cultural zeitgeist of each individual platform, so that you're not showing up and making, for lack of a better word, an ass of yourself, right? So I think there's a lot of talk about like authenticity online and how to show up authentically, whether you're a brand or a person, like a creator. I think we as users are aware now that how you show up online in any capacity is a performance, right? You just kind of have to find the best performance that matches what you're trying to get across. So that isn't necessarily going to be a hit to your authenticity. Where a lot of brands and creators go wrong is not understanding the culture of the different platforms that they're posting on.
And Sophie, from your perspective, you were talking about like how you were posting on TikTok and how that resonated with the Ferro Foods, the buyer from there. When it came to building that persona for yourself on TikTok and posting on there, what did you find worked for you?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I don't have a marketing degree. I don't come from digital marketing. I definitely do not understand the algorithms of each platform.
No one does.
Nor can I try to pretend that I know the trends. So for me, it was never going to be about trying to beat the algorithm or jump on the next trend or do the voiceover dancey things to the whatever's trending. I cannot do that. I actually felt like quite a geriatric when I started posting on TikTok, truly for the first time in my life, really old. And what I found resonated with my audience was honestly just doing whatever I felt like, having no plan, and just speaking about my journey, because that's something that was true to me and that's something I could actually speak about. So building a business from the ground up, real challenges that I was going through, like legal battles, people, trademarking Soul Tonic in Asia and going through a full legal thing with that. I would talk about that online. Things that potentially 10 years ago you wouldn't speak about online as a business owner, I spoke about, and that's what resonated with people the most because it was just truth, authenticity, kind of vulnerability, and that's what I still go with. So yeah, that's what works, especially for the kind of older people that I'm reaching that are gonna give me a step up in business. They're not sometimes Gen Z, right? Maybe they're a commercial director of a big retailer overseas, and that person wants to know that the founder has a real voice and has drive, and they're looking for things differently. So I'm kind of trying to hit multiple audiences when I post.
And how planned were you with this? Were you scripting everything, or was it just off the cuff?
No, unscripted. But I'm an extrovert. So I just say what I want and hope for the best. And I say things that I shouldn't. And I'm always getting myself in trouble. I mean, my dad's in the audience. He will know that I grew up just talking back to every teacher, like the amount of parent teachers he had, which were just a disaster. But that's kind of worked in my favour now. A little bit, I think, because I don't second guess what I'm saying. I just put it out there and pray.
Can I just speak to the algorithm point?
Absolutely.
So I think we talk a lot about this like elusive algorithm that, we have no idea what these different platforms want. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think if you pay attention to the different products and features that each platform is releasing, that's what they're prioritizing. So that's how, if you're using those features or those products, that's how you will get engagement. So every single platform has a blog post, which they, announce new things. So like YouTube will say, we're releasing shorts and our monetization on shorts is gonna be so much higher for the first X amount of months. So then okay, they're prioritizing shorts because that's a new feature that they're pushing. Or TikTok will be like, now we're offering 30-minute videos. Okay, so start posting 30-minute videos and you'll see a lot of engagement. So the platforms are much more transparent about what they want you to do if you are paying attention to the new things that are constantly coming out and evolving. Obviously, it is hard to keep up in terms of, we can't have giant content teams. Like every company can't have just a giant content team that's keeping up with it. But if you really pay attention to the different individual blogs on each platform, then you'll know. And kind of a general rule of thumb is every platform prioritizes retention and watch time.
Hayley, any thoughts on the algorithm and
well, look,
gaming it?
I mean, on my podcast, I interviewed Catherine Marsh, who is one of the directors at LinkedIn here in Australia. And the first question I asked her, obviously, because I, similarly to Sophie and Lauren, have no filter and ask whatever I want to ask. And I said, tell me about the algorithm. Like, what should I be posting? And she's like, oh, no one at LinkedIn really knows. There's like a handful of people that do know and they're under lock and key and that's it. And I was like, great. So anybody that's posting on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok being like, I know the secret to the algorithm, they're lying, right? So I think that, as Lauren said, it is just about, finding what they're prioritising and what, platform features they're putting out there. And as Sophie said, being really authentic to yourself, I hate that word, but really authentic to yourself in terms of not just trying to copy what the next person, what Susan's doing down the road, but like just doing stuff that feels really natural to you. And that's what's going to get you your community instead of someone else's community.
Do you have any other advice around being authentic in this world? Because obviously, like, we live in this era now where there's such a crossover, between our own personal brands, social media, everything. And so how do you stay authentic in all this?
Look, I think that a lot of people confuse authenticity and vulnerability. And, when we do talks or workshops in big businesses like financial institutions or, insurance companies, and they're like, well, I can't talk about products and services online, so what am I supposed to talk about? My family? And I'm like, well, no, Greg. What you are supposed to talk about is the things that you would pick up and talk to your clients about. You don't pick them up and be like, oh, by the way, we've got this new product and service. That's not the first thing you talk about. You go, hey, how was your weekend with your kids? Did they play sport? Like, you find the things that you have in common with people and you talk to them about that first before you even talk to them about what you're actually calling them about. So I think the biggest thing with authenticity for me, and it's really simple, it's about sharing stuff that it's the thought of saying, this is me. It's not, I hope they like me. It's, I'm okay if they don't. And sharing stuff that actually is you as a human being, talking how you talk, showing up as how you show up. And I don't think that you need to unpack all of your childhood traumas when you're sharing content online, as a lot of people think that you have to in order to succeed. I don't think that I know the three of us share quite freely across all of our social platforms the trials and tribulations that we have as business owners. It's probably why we connected in the first place, to be honest. But I think that for the most part, we share that because we feel comfortable sharing that. And I think that people have to be comfortable with what they're sharing, otherwise they won't be consistent. And I think above all, consistency wins. So I don't think it's necessarily about being the most vulnerable or the most authentic. I actually think it comes down to being the most consistent. So whatever you feel the most comfortable being consistent with is what I think will win.
I agree with, I was just going to say I agree with that. I think we use authenticity and relatability interchangeably a lot when we speak about social media. But when you think about some of the biggest trends over the last few years, like quiet luxury, clean girl aesthetic, those are aspirational trends. And those are corners of the internet that really popped off. And, people grew huge followings from sharing that kind of aspirational content. So if that feels authentic to what you want to create, to Hayley's point, what you can consistently create and what you want to put out there and how you want to be branding yourself, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's all about a performance online. It just depends on how you're going to execute that performance.
And I'd add to that is, like, there's a lot of brands. You look at Alex Earle, for example. She grew her brand by sharing every detail of her university experience, like every detail, right? But that doesn't mean that everyone has to share every detail. I think there are also hundreds and thousands of faceless brands out there with millions of followers. No one knows who the fuck behind them, So I think that it really just depends on how and what you'll be the most consistent with.
So trust is becoming something which is a very rare commodity now online. Particularly, there's a prevalence of online scams, but also with generative AI and some of the content which is being created out there. Lauren, how can you be seen as being not just authentic, but also trustworthy in this day and age? You touched on one before about actually holding up your degree before that, but that's not necessarily practical for someone to...
But also, how many times have people checked a degree? Like, I have a degree, right? And I went through university being like, I've got to get good scores. No one's ever asked me for my transcript.
Please get degrees.
Please get degrees, absolutely. But I think
the grave with that.
No one's ever asked me for my transcript. No one's ever asked me for my certificate that I finished university. So, I would also argue that, how impactful... I get asked weekly from students that are studying marketing or thinking about going into marketing and advertising, how important is university? I mean, I went... But if I had someone ask me now, I'd be like, it's not the only way in. I would argue that if you go to uni, great, it's your commitment to 3 to 4 years of work. But similarly, you can do a job, an intern or work for somebody for 3 to 4 years and have that same amount of commitment, same amount of skill set and learn stuff. I'm not saying that's the same for a doctor or a medical professional because you do have to learn shit there, but there's marketing and advertising evolves so quickly. So for my industry... actually getting your foot in the door and learning how people do it, because half the stuff I learned at university was redundant by the time I left. Mm-hmm. So I think that for various degrees, I think that, expertise and the type of expertise that you have is sometimes in question.
And Sophie, you were saying that get a degree? Was that what you...
No, I'm saying, well, to be honest, everything that I've had to do to launch my business hasn't been remotely what I learnt in my commerce degree at Sydney Uni, which I thought I had to do. But what it did give me, it gave me my grad role at EY. And then I built my network. And then I was able to move into these more global, like, cooler brands. And then I fell in love with brands. And then I wanted to create my own. So, I wouldn't say don't get a degree. I definitely don't want to stand here like on record saying that, for sure. But I agree with Hayley that it's coming into question. There's a lot of avenues, and I think a person with the right hustle and ambition can do whatever they want regardless of the degree. I think it comes down to the person and their drive, really.
I think it obviously depends on the industry. I think when I look at it from like an information perspective online, if we're going to consider like trustworthiness, right? Like it is incredibly important that the people that you're taking information from online are experts and, are providing value and disseminating factual information. We know that the majority of young people now get their news on TikTok, and unfortunately we also know that TikTok is just like filled with misinformation and disinformation. So that's where I really see there is a genuine need for true expertise. And you'll see most of the genuine experts online now, they spend their time basically debunking all the fake news that's out there, right? So we're in this like very kind of bizarre space. I think, unfortunately, what that means for us as users and consumers is that it's up to us right now to be the ones to have the digital literacy, the media literacy, to understand like what we're watching and have those skills to vet it properly. Because the platforms at the moment, they've grown way too quickly. There's way too much information out there. They don't have the teams in place, the resources in place, or they don't want to spend the money to put that in place to actually combat misinformation and disinformation on their platforms. So yeah, it is unfortunately right now, I would say, up to the user, because otherwise, I don't think that we're going to have a very safe online space if we're not kind of teaching ourselves how to stay safe and how to understand what you're watching and if it's factual or not.
What role does the government and policy have to do with actually helping people stay safe online?
I think if the government, it's hard because a lot of the people making the policies they don't fully understand, right? Like what is happening. I'm sure we all saw that thing from the States where the guy was like, what's a Finsta? Or like, are you going to commit to ending Finsta? So, the people making the policies, a lot of them don't fully understand, and they don't understand the stakes. Like the stakes are really, really high. And we've seen so many instances of that over the years where things have just gotten so out of control, and misinformation, disinformation all over social media has absolutely impacted elections and so many like crazy things you could just never even imagine. So, I feel like when it comes to the government's role, there absolutely needs to be more policies in place that put the pressure and more onus on the platforms to roll out proper moderation. But again, one of the biggest problems is the amount of content constantly being uploaded. We just don't have the manpower for that. And the AI that's in place right now to moderate that is often, people are getting their accounts striked, and it's not perfect yet. And one of the biggest issues as well with moderation is when you do have manual moderation, you have teams moderating it, then they're exposed to really harmful content, really traumatic content. So there is a lot to work out, I think, before the government can properly get involved, unfortunately.
And with generative AI only growing in importance and its usage, as we touched on before, in content creation, also personal brand content for your personal brand, how do we see this continue to evolve? Like, Sophie, are you starting to use generative AI at all in any of the content you're producing?
I'm not, but I'm hypersensitive to it, and that's where in-person networking becomes so valuable, because often online you don't know if you're speaking to a bot or you're speaking to a Hayley whose team has created the content for a brand. And as much as I love Hayley, I want to meet up with the person who posted, not Hayley who's posting for that person. And that same goes with the bot. And that's where you need to build trust with that person. And to do that, often you have to meet up with them one-on-one because you don't know who you're speaking to. That being said, I am being reached out to almost daily of AI type platforms that can generate all of my LinkedIn content for me. They can create videos for my brand and they can schedule them and post them all. And it's a full service package. So I think it's definitely something to watch out for. I'm definitely dipping my toes into some AI at the moment for the business, more just things to help efficiencies rather than my own content. But I have no doubt that other brands are using AI to produce a lot of their content at the moment.
And Hayley, what are you seeing in terms of how AI is continuing to shape how we're building brands online, so personal brands online? Do you think we're going to reach a saturation point where it's all going to be AI generated?
Well, I think I regularly refer to ChatGPT as my business partner because I don't have a business partner. And sometimes I kind of get to the point where I go through phases where I'm like, I'd love someone to just bounce an idea off. And it's like now, right? Like I can't call one of my friends or whatever. So I'll just put it in there being like, how should I do this? Or where do I start with this? Am I going to copy and paste that into a document and send it to a client? Absolutely not. Am I going to copy and paste that and put it up onto LinkedIn? No. But I do think that it is a great starting point, and I think that it's a question that I get asked all the time. ChatGPT is going to replace you and your business, and I'm like, no. But our copywriters use ChatGPT. We're working with big brands like top 4 banks, financial companies, that we're creating ChatGPT prompts for them to use with their teams so that all the content looks different based on that person. So I think leaning into that style of content and creation of content can actually help, because I think, we see with businesses, for example, every month they have this intraweb or whatever, and they'll be like, hey, you guys need to post 10 pieces of content this month, and these are some templates that you can use, and they copy and paste them in, and then you've got 20 people from that organisation all seemingly saying the same thing, and funnily it's word for word, right? And people see straight through that because it's not written in their tone of voice and it's not written by them, and they're like, Karen doesn't say I'm pleased to announce that I'm starting a new job when she rolls up to the bar on a Friday night, right? And I think that being able to lean into ChatGPT and AI tools that can help organisations be more efficient in how they're creating content is great. We've created, 50 prompts last week for a client of ours that they're going to use for the next 12 months to send out to their team, which allows their team to input their tone of voice, how they speak, how long they want the prompt, how long they want the piece of information to be, so that they can create content quickly, but it still allows them to churn out content that looks like them, right? So I think there's a place for it. I don't think it will replace in-person networking. And I think we're becoming more and more savvy now. I went to a talk on Monday around the importance to be teaching everybody critical thinking, deductive reasoning and judgment, and continuing to teach, sending adults, over 30-year-olds back to school to teach those things to them, to allow them to use those set of skills when working with these new technologies. So I think that the onus is on us when it comes to working with technology like that, and how we use it. But I think people are becoming pretty savvy with it and how it's being used, and people see straight through it.
I think for me that's one of the benefits of education, of actually helping people be able to think through those things, understanding how to actually pass all the information and think about it critically rather than just accepting it verbatim. Yeah. So we're almost out of time. So the final question which I have for each one of you is, what is one piece of advice which you can leave the audience here with in terms of how to actually continue to build their personal brand and network in this day and age?
Sure.
I'll start with Sophie.
Just reach out to people and don't be embarrassed, because if you're not reaching out to them, someone else is. And so if you're embarrassed about it, just remember there are so many other people that are also doing it. It's not embarrassing anymore. It's cool. Connecting with people is cool. So get over your ego. Don't be embarrassed. It's not awkward anymore. Send that message, send that LinkedIn message, and tell them why they're doing something that is cool, Why are you inspired by them? Why do you want to connect with them? And let them know, because that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So many of our most valuable pieces of advice and mentorship meetings have come from just like totally cold emails. I would also say when it comes to personal branding, to reiterate what I said earlier, really do the legwork on each individual platform and understand the culture on each individual platform. Not only will it protect you as a poster from posting something that is, possibly going to get backlash or be risky, but it will also make you appear, of course, much more authentic because you understand what you're posting.
I would say done is better than perfect, and it's something that I say all the time to my team and my clients. So many people get caught up in things being perfect. I blinked there, or I said when I was talking, and it's like, you're a human being. Like, you will say you will blink. Like, there will be lighting that makes you look older than you are, and that's part of being in life. Like, I think posting stuff that makes you more human is actually stuff that is relatable. And I think what Sophie said before around, when you meet people and people go, oh, wow, you look like you do online, huge compliment. Secondly is like, you sound like you do online. And I think that more now than ever, this realness and authenticity is becoming more and more rare. And so showing up on platforms as yourself is actually the most powerful thing that you can do. And as I said, consistency always wins. So getting the content out there and doing it is better than it being perfect.
And in the spirit of this session, which is all about personal branding and networking in the online and physical world, we're giving you two opportunities to actually continue the conversation with us, both online and in person. So up there on the screen, you'll see QR codes to all of our LinkedIn profiles, so feel free to connect with us online. Or if you would like to connect with any of our fantastic panelists in person, they are going to be at the in-person creator meetup at 12:30 p.m. at Clear Hayes House out the front of the ICC. So on that note, I'd love to thank Sophie Hood, Lauren Meisner, and Hayley Westoby.
Thank you.
For this fantastic conversation.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you. Connect.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you loved the discussion, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, or share it with a friend. We have new episodes dropping every fortnight.